I have some other things to show you about the vector sequencer. I'm currently using vector as my master clock, and I'm using D minor as the master scale for all parts. I have routed MIDI clock through the expander's MIDI out. With this configuration, I can start my DAW and other sequencers which sync to MIDI clock when I press run. I have part 1 routed to the first set of pitch, gate, and velocity outs, and part 2 is routed to the second set. Part 1 controls one modular synth voice. Part 2 controls my shared system. I have parts 7 and 8 routed to the expander's MIDI out. Part 7 is routed to channel 4, controlling one polysynth. And part 8 is routed to channel 2, controlling another polysynth. On this page, I can set the LED colors for each part and the part length. For parts 5 through 8, I can set the part type to chord mode, so that each step can transmit more than one note to make a chord. I have part 8 set to chord mode. When I set the type to chord, the second display will indicate that you are about to make a format change, at which point you will need to press Shift plus Clear. Once this is done, you will be able to select your chords for each step on the second pitch page. I can also give each part a custom name from this menu, as I have done for parts 1, 2, 7, and 8. This is the Scenes page. It gives me an overview of which presets are active in each part. In this project, preset 1 for each part has no active gates, so you won't hear anything when I press run. When I select preset 2 for the first two parts, gates will begin to trigger my modular voices. I'm using trigger input 1 to clock part 1. And I'm using trigger input 2 to clock part 2. I'm using two Euclidean trigger sequences from my clock generator. The first of which is 5 steps long, with 3 steps filled. The second is 7 steps long, with 4 steps filled. I have part 1 set to a length of 3, but only one step has an active gate. So far, this sequence is pretty boring. I'm going to transpose part 1 with an external keyboard to make things a little more interesting. I can select a different scene to change the presets for more than one part at the same time. This works very similarly to scenes in Ableton Live and Bitwig. I can move to a different scene to choose which presets make up that scene before I trigger it. I can press Q to trigger the scene. The parts in this project are no longer than 4 steps. As I mentioned earlier, part 1 is only 3 steps long. I use the subsequencers to introduce some variation. I'm using part 1's first subsequencer to transpose, with a length of 5 and a rate of 1 bar. This makes a very simple 3-step sequence into something more complex. Each part has 2 subsequencers. With each, you can control transpose, octave, rate, direction, and start position. I can also introduce variation manually by using the evolve operation. In my third scene, I'm using part 8 to create chords. On the first pitch page, I can set the root note for each step. On the second pitch page, I can select a chord for each step. Though this part is only 2 steps long, I can add repeats and change the step length to make things more interesting. With all of the ways to add variation to each part, and the ability to trigger groups of presets together, Vector makes a dynamically playable sequencer as well as an inspiring compositional tool.